Steele, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, and also with us, U.S. Former Maryland Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards. Welcome all. Michael Steele, talk to me first about the president's approval rating. It's down in our new poll to 42%. Does that spell trouble for Democrats running across the country today?
Oh, absolutely it does. And I think you see it playing out in a little place called Virginia, where, you know, Terry McAuliffe tried to nationalize the race by tagging his opponent, Glenn Youngkin, with President Trump and Trumpism. Glenn Youngkin not only parried that particular thrust, but pivoted in a way off the mistakes of a former governor on education. So while Terry wanted to, nationalize it, Glenn wanted to localize it, and that's going to be an interesting strength for Republicans going into the next cycle, who are looking to give Trump the Heisman, if you will, just sort of take that pose, right, that Youngkin did, to create some distance between a national conversation that some Democrats want to have around Trump and what Republicans want to say on the ground closest to the people. And I think Virginia offers a really good example of potential success there.
And, Donna, let's talk about New Jersey, where you've got a Democratic incumbent governor, Phil Murphy, and you've also got Jack Ciattarelli. Ciattarelli is the, sort of came out of nowhere, doesn't have a political background, statewide. Where do you see this going? It's not been as close, certainly not as close as what we're seeing in Virginia.
Well, I think things are leaning the direction of Governor Murphy, but here's a challenge, I think, for Democrats in New Jersey and across the country, is that Phil Murphy has an opportunity to make history himself, winning re-election as a Democrat. But, he's had to walk the fine line of, obviously getting the President Biden's endorsement and support and trying to rally Democrats. And he seems to be faring a little bit better than Terry McAuliffe is in this, but it is a little closer than even Murphy would like. But it looks like he might pull that off in New Jersey.
And, Brendan, let's talk about the inaction on the president's agenda. He'd wanted to go to the summits in Rome and Glasgow with, both of these bills, or at least one of them. Now, of course, he's coming home to the same negotiations with Joe Manchin last night, throwing up that he wants to see the Congressional Budget Office score. And we're told by Steny Hoyer today that'll take 10 days, a week to 10 days. So the speaker is still saying that she's hoping there will be an agreement, a final agreement, sometime tonight. You've worked for the speakers before. Is her hope misplaced?
Yeah, we've actually heard that from Speaker Pelosi several times now, that they have an agreement or something is coming, and then it always falls apart. In my opinion, they're trying a little too hard to create momentum that clearly doesn't exist. Now, if Joe Manchin had come out yesterday and said that he's comfortable moving forward, that'd be one thing. But he basically said the opposite, and they haven't changed their plans at all. So the House can move forward if they want to, but Joe Manchin is very much still in charge right now, which I think is contributing to this national environment we're seeing with Democrats. Obviously, you have a lack of enthusiasm among the Democratic base, but Joe Biden also got elected to be someone who gets things done, competent government, someone who knows how to work in Washington. And we're nearly a year into this administration, and they don't really have much to show for it. So I understand why they're frustrated and why they want to move forward, why Nancy Pelosi wants to call for a vote, but they clearly don't have their act together yet. And even if the House acts, the final deal is still perhaps weeks, if not months away.
And, Donna, how concerned are Democrats getting that, let's say that McAuliffe, it's a tight race, if they get beaten in Virginia, and that it'll be seen as a bellwether, Donald Trump will try to take credit? What are their worries really about next year, the midterms and retaining control in this such a closely divided Congress?
Well, I think that we may be in danger of reading either too much or too little into the Virginia race. But clearly, this race has been run on a national platform, and there are a lot of Democrats across the country who are paying attention to this. I do think that one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about is turnout. It looks like early voting numbers are off the charts. Democrats have been knocking on a lot of doors and making a lot of phone calls in the waning days of the race in Virginia. And so it is going to be really close. And I think that we could read a lot into this election in Virginia, whether there's a win or a loss for Terry McAuliffe. But it should make Democrats think hard about, one, how to run and win a race in this environment, and also whether or not Democrats can do something to gin up enthusiasm among its voters and its base as we move into 2022. And I don't think that we are months away from an agreement. We are days away from an agreement among Democrats, and they will have all of 2022 or most of it to be able to run on an agenda that Democrats can embrace.
And Brendan Buck, has Glenn Youngkin shown how to take a cultural issue sort of almost out of nowhere and capitalize on it with arguably a lot of distortions that really don't affect the curriculum in Virginia schools, but it's become a big deal, education?
Yeah, I don't know how easy it would be necessarily to replicate, but you talk to a lot of Republicans who will tell you this is the template. Keep Donald Trump, don't antagonize Donald Trump supporters, but keep him a little bit at arm's length, and try to localize the race and don't let it become nationalized. Your colleague Chuck Todd says the old axiom that all politics is local no longer applies, and that all politics are national. And I think Glenn Youngkin is trying to see if that holds true anymore. And if he can make this a local issue, like when was the last time you heard of a high-profile issue that was focused on education? I think that's the first time in a long time. And so if you can find hyper-localized issues that resonate, and frankly go after probably the key demographic that's been hurting Republicans, suburban educated people, I think that's the key target that they're working towards.
And there's also, of course, the concern among many people that the early results that perhaps because of the way the vote is counted in Virginia this time, they have made changes because of early voting, because of mail-in voting, that if it's a close race, we won't know tonight. And then they have to count the mail-in ballots, which are not only until Friday. So, Michael Steele, what about people's suspicions, which will be fed by anything that Donald Trump says? In our new poll that came out last night, 50% of Republicans said that they're not trusting the way votes are counted. And if one side or the other is ahead, but there isn't a winner tonight, and we're waiting days, what mischief can be made?
Well, senior election officials in Virginia have decided to get ahead of that curve and have promised changes that will pretty much bring about the efficiency. So we'll probably get some good results tonight. My bet is. Number two, Republicans in Virginia have been advocating and actually pushing early voting, despite the national narrative from Trump. So that's going to have an impact as well. We'll see how many Republicans pay heed to that.
Michael Steele, Brendan Buck, Donna Edwards, thank you so much.